Have you ever wondered how people survive bone-crushing winters inside what looks like nothing more than a pile of stacked rocks? No furnace, no radiator, no thermostat on the wall, and yet families have been living comfortably through some of the most savage cold on the planet for centuries. Today we are going to find out exactly how they do it, and I promise by the end of this video, you are going to look at a stone wall in a completely different way. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this is the place where we dig into the kinds of questions that sound simple on the surface, but open up into something genuinely fascinating once you start pulling at the thread. And this topic, trust me, is one of those. Because what Tibetans figured out about staying warm without any modern technology is not just interesting from a history or culture standpoint. It is actually a masterclass in engineering, physics, and human ingenuity that architects and builders today are still trying to replicate. So stick with me here because we are going to go layer by layer through this, just like the walls of one of these incredible homes. Let us start by getting a real sense of where we are talking about, because context here matters enormously. The Tibetan Plateau is not just a high place, it is the highest large plateau on Earth, sitting at an average elevation of more than 4,000 meters above sea level. To give you a comparison, that is higher than most mountain peaks that people consider serious climbing challenges in other parts of the world. And yet entire communities, towns, and cities exist up there, and have existed up there for a very, very long time. People call it the roof of the world, and once you understand the climate, you understand why that nickname carries so much weight. Winters on the plateau are not just cold in the way that someone from a temperate climate might imagine cold. We are talking about nights that plunge far below freezing, consistently, for months at a time. Fierce winds tear across open stretches of land with very little to slow them down. The air is thin, which means less atmosphere between you and the raw extremes of temperature. There is very little moisture in the air during winter, so what warmth does exist tends to bleed away fast once the sun goes down. And here is what makes this so remarkable. In many traditional Tibetan villages, modern heating infrastructure never arrived. No central heating systems, no gas lines, no electric radiators. None of that. These communities developed their own solutions over hundreds of years, and those solutions are embedded directly into the architecture and the daily rhythms of life. So when we look at a traditional Tibetan stone house, we are not just looking at a building. We are looking at a piece of accumulated wisdom that answered the question of survival in one of the most unforgiving climates on Earth. Now, the first thing most people notice about traditional Tibetan homes is the material, thick stone blocks, packed earth. Sometimes a combination of both. And the initial assumption a lot of people make is that this is just what was available. The mountains are full of stone, so they built with stone. Which is true, but it completely undersells what is actually going on here from a physical standpoint. Stone and rammed earth are what scientists and engineers call high thermal mass materials. And thermal mass is a concept that is absolutely central to understanding how these homes work. Thermal mass refers to a material's ability to absorb heat energy, store it, and then release it gradually over time. Think of it like a battery, but for heat instead of electricity. During the daytime on the Tibetan Plateau, even in the middle of winter, sunlight at that altitude is surprisingly intense. The sun blazes down on those thick stone walls, and the stone soaks up that heat energy and holds onto it. Then, when the temperature outside drops sharply after sunset, the stone slowly begins to release that stored warmth into the interior of the home. This is not a small or trivial effect. A thick stone wall can stay warm long after the outside world has gone freezing cold. It acts as a buffer between the brutal exterior environment and the living space inside. And when you think about it, that is exactly what you need in a climate where the temperature difference between midday and midnight can be enormous. Earth and stone do not heat up as quickly as lighter materials, but they also do not cool down quickly. That steady, slow release of warmth is the foundation of the entire thermal strategy of these homes. And when we say thick walls, we are not talking about a slight upgrade from what you might see in a standard modern house. Traditional Tibetan walls are commonly between 50 and 80 centimeters thick. In older buildings, they can be even thicker than that. To put that in perspective, a typical interior wall in a modern Western home might be around 10 to 15 centimeters. We are talking about walls that are 5 to 8 times thicker, sometimes more. Those dimensions are not accidental. They serve multiple purposes simultaneously. First, they dramatically increase thermal mass. More material means more heat storage capacity. A wall that is 80 centimeters of dense stone or packed earth is holding on to a tremendous amount of thermal energy by the time evening arrives. Second, those thick walls create enormous resistance to heat flow. Heat moves through solid materials, but it moves slowly through dense, thick ones. A freezing wind hitting the outside of an 80-centimeter stone wall has a very long journey before any of that cold reaches the interior surface of the wall. The cold simply cannot get through fast enough to significantly affect the temperature inside. Third, and people often overlook this one, those massive walls provide structural stability against the kinds of winds that rake across the plateau. These are not gentle breezes. Mountain winds can be violent and sustained. The sheer weight and solidity of these walls means the house does not just stay thermally stable, it stays physically stable as well. Everything about the wall thickness serves the goal of keeping the people inside comfortable and safe. But the walls alone are only part of the picture. Where you put those walls, and which direction the house faces, is equally important. And this is where traditional Tibetan architecture shows a level of sophistication that genuinely impresses people who study passive solar design today. Almost universally, traditional Tibetan homes are oriented so that the main living spaces face south. In the northern hemisphere, the sun travels across the southern portion of the sky throughout the year. At the latitude of the Tibetan Plateau, during winter, the sun stays relatively low in the sky, but it is still extraordinarily bright because of the altitude and the thin, clear atmosphere. A south-facing building catches that sunlight directly and maximally. The windows on the south side of a traditional Tibetan home are typically large and generous. This is intentional. During daylight hours, sunlight pours through those windows and floods the interior living spaces with both light and heat. This is called passive solar heating, and it is completely free. No fuel, no technology, no infrastructure required. The sun does the work. And because the thermal mass of the walls and floors absorbs this solar energy during the day, the warmth does not just disappear when the sun goes down. It lingers, slowly radiating from every surface that soaked it up during daylight hours. The orientation of the house toward the sun is not a coincidence or an aesthetic choice. It is a deliberate thermal engineering decision that has been refined over generations. Now, if the south side of the house is designed to welcome energy in, the north side is designed to do exactly the opposite, and to keep the cold out with everything it has got. The north side of the Tibetan Plateau, particularly during winter, is where the coldest and most punishing winds come from. Temperatures on that side of a building can feel dramatically more extreme because of the wind chill factor, and the wind itself accelerates heat loss from any surface it touches. Traditional Tibetan builders understood this without needing scientific instruments or thermodynamic equations. They understood it through observation, experience, and the practical knowledge passed down through generations. The north-facing walls of these homes are constructed to be as solid and impenetrable as possible. Windows on the north side are minimized or eliminated entirely. Any opening in a wall is a potential pathway for warmth to escape and cold to enter, and the builders treated those openings on the north side with extreme caution. What this creates is a house that behaves almost like a directed thermal device. One face is open and receptive, collecting solar energy and maximizing the benefit of sunlight. The opposite face is a fortress, presenting the minimum possible surface area to the cold and the wind. The combination of these two design principles, solar orientation on one side and wind protection on the other, means the house is constantly working to favor warmth retention. It is not passive in the sense of doing nothing. It is passive in the sense that it harvests and preserves energy without any mechanical systems involved. The roof is the next piece of the puzzle, and it is another example of brilliant simplicity. Traditional Tibetan roofs are flat. This surprises people who come from climates where pitched roofs are the norm, because a sloped roof is specifically designed to shed precipitation quickly. But on the Tibetan plateau, the winters are actually quite dry. Snowfall is not heavy in many parts of the plateau. So a flat roof makes perfect sense, and a flat roof can be built in a way that a pitched roof cannot. The construction of a traditional flat Tibetan roof is essentially a layering process. It starts with heavy wooden beams spanning the walls of the building. On top of those beams, branches and smaller timbers are laid across to create a base layer. Then comes packed earth, sometimes several layers of it, compacted down and sealed with clay. The result is a roof that can be extremely heavy, which is actually an advantage. All of that mass sitting on top of the house adds to the overall thermal mass of the structure. The roof soaks up heat during the day and contributes to keeping the interior warm overnight. There is also a significant insulation effect from all that packed earth. Heat rises, and without proper insulation, a building loses an enormous amount of its warmth upward through the ceiling. The thick earthen roof slows this process dramatically. It is essentially a layer of insulation sitting directly on top of the living space, and it is made from the same material that the ground itself is made of, requiring nothing imported, nothing manufactured in a factory, nothing that needs to be shipped across thousands of kilometers. The materials are literally underfoot. Let us step inside now, because what happens inside these homes is just as important as the way the outside is built. One of the most consistent features of traditional Tibetan home life is the way that daily existence is concentrated into a single central room. This is not just a cultural preference. It is a survival strategy that makes perfect physical sense. Think about what happens when you gather multiple people into a relatively small space. Human bodies generate heat. That is not a trivial amount of warmth when you have a family sharing a room for hours at a time. Add to that the heat from cooking, the warmth from sunlight streaming through the south-facing windows, and the gradual radiation of stored heat from the thick walls and floors, and you have a space that is actively accumulating warmth from multiple sources simultaneously. By concentrating all of this into one central room, the family avoids the problem of trying to heat a large, sprawling space with very limited heat sources. You do not waste warmth on rooms that nobody is using. You keep it all together in one place where people are living, working, eating, talking, and resting. The entire social structure of daily life in these homes is thermally optimized. It is not that Tibetans designed their social habits around staying warm. It is more accurate to say that over generations, the habits that helped people survive became the habits that were passed on and maintained. The two things, the social patterns and the thermal needs, converged into a way of life that works beautifully. And at the center of that central room, almost always, is the stove. Traditional Tibetan cooking stoves are typically made of a metal, and they burn whatever fuel is available in the local environment. On the plateau, that often means dried yak dung, which might sound unusual to some audiences, but is actually a remarkably effective fuel source that burns hot and relatively cleanly when properly dried. Wood is also used where it is available, along with agricultural residue from crop production. The primary function of the stove is cooking. Butter tea is prepared on it. Tsesampa, which is roasted barley flour, is prepared with it. Meals for the family happen because of it. But while the stove is doing its culinary work, it is also radiating heat into the surrounding space, and the family that is gathered around it for cooking and eating and socializing is benefiting from that warmth directly and immediately. There is something elegant about a heat source that serves two essential purposes at once. It is maximally efficient in the way that only truly practical, necessity-driven design tends to be. You are not burning fuel purely to stay warm. You are burning fuel to eat, and staying warm is a bonus that comes along with that. In an environment where fuel sources require effort to gather and transport, that dual function is not just convenient, it is an important part of how the household manages its energy resources across a long winter. Now, none of what we have described so far would be quite enough on its own if the interior of the home were bare stone floors and empty walls. The final layer of the thermal system inside a traditional Tibetan home is the textiles, and they are everywhere. Thick yak wool carpets cover the floors, rugs hang on walls, blankets and heavy textiles are piled on sleeping areas. Yak wool is an extraordinary material for cold climates. Yaks are animals perfectly adapted to the extreme conditions of the plateau, and their wool reflects that adaptation. It is dense, it traps air effectively, and trapped air is what creates insulation. When you lay a thick yak wool carpet over a cold stone floor, you create a barrier between your body and the thermal mass that, during the coldest parts of the night, is trying to absorb warmth from anything it contacts. The carpet means your feet and your body stay separated from that cold surface. At night, when temperatures outside drop sharply, and even the thermal mass of the walls begins to struggle to keep up, layered bedding made from wool and animal hides becomes critical. These layers trap the warmth generated by the body and hold it close. It is the same principle as high-performance modern camping gear, where layers of insulating material create zones of trapped air that resist heat loss. The Tibetan approach to bedding arrived at the same physical solution through centuries of practical necessity rather than laboratory research. When you step back and look at everything together, what becomes clear is that no single element of this approach is solely responsible for keeping people warm. It is the combination, the system, that makes the difference. The thick stone walls provide thermal mass and wind resistance. The south-facing orientation maximizes solar gain. The minimal north-facing openings minimize heat loss to cold winds. The heavy flat roof insulates from above. The central living space concentrates heat from multiple sources. The stove provides cooking and warmth simultaneously. The textiles insulate bodies from cold surfaces and trap heat during sleep. And beyond the architecture and the objects, the habits of daily life themselves are part of the system. Drinking butter tea, which is a hot, high-calorie drink that warms from the inside, is not just a cultural tradition. It is a thermal and nutritional strategy. Wearing heavy wool robes and layers of clothing throughout the day means that the body's own heat is conserved and does not need to be replaced as frequently by external sources. Gathering together rather than spreading out across separate spaces keeps the human contribution to room temperature meaningful. What looks to an outside observer like a simple, even primitive stone house is actually something far more sophisticated. It is the product of generations of observation, experimentation, and refinement. Every choice about materials, orientation, layout, and daily habit has been filtered through the unforgiving test of survival in one of the coldest inhabited places on the surface of this planet. The houses that worked and the habits that worked were the ones that got passed down. The ones that did not work simply did not survive long enough to be passed on. That is not design in the sense of an architect sitting down with a blueprint. That is design through lived experience across hundreds of years. The Tibetan approach to staying warm in stone houses is a reminder that human beings are extraordinarily capable of solving hard problems with whatever materials and knowledge are at hand. These solutions, built from nothing more than stone, earth, wood, wool, sunlight, and shared body heat, represent some of the most efficient passive thermal management ever developed by any culture anywhere on Earth. Modern architects and sustainable building designers have been studying these principles for decades and incorporating them into contemporary structures. The wisdom was there all along, frozen into the walls of villages on the highest plateau in the world. And that, I think, is the most remarkable part of this whole story. Not just that people found a way to survive in such an extreme place, but that the solution they developed is genuinely brilliant by any measure, ancient or modern. The roof of the world did not just test human endurance. It shaped human ingenuity in ways we are still learning from today. Alright, if this kind of deep dive into how people and places work together is your thing, then you are absolutely in the right place on this channel. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what comes next, because we have got more of these coming. And if you have a question or a topic you want to see explored, drop it in the comments below. I read them, and your suggestions genuinely shape what gets made here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.